Hello and welcome back. I have with me the wonderful Dr. Amelia Phillips. Welcome.
Thank you so much and good to see you, Jessica. How are you today?
Doing well, although I'm a bit um, tired.
I bet you are.
It's been quite a few hours of content, wonderful content, though. I mean, the level of technical content and women speakers that we've had contribute their insights has been just phenomenal. And I'm really actually looking forward to your talk on women in cyberspace, getting your PhD. This is actually something I have thought about as well, getting a PhD in cyber. But I always wonder, being in 40s, am I too old? Would I still get value, or how long would it take? So, Amelia, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I just am really looking forward to the talk.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, I am going to share my screen. Okay, women in cyberspace, getting your
Loving the purple.
PhD.
Looks great.
I tried to get it to match, so glad you like it. Okay, so we're going to start off with women in cyberspace, which I'm sure you've been talking about for the last 18 hours or so. Then why get a PhD at all? How to pick a topic, how to pick a school and an advisor. Then I'll talk a little bit about my journey, taking care of yourself along the way, and then go into a Q&A. Okay, so the numbers have increased so far as women in cybersecurity and in cyberspace. 10 years ago, only about 11% of the workforce, at least the United States, were women. That's up to about 25% now. And it's great because we bring such a different perspective with all of our different backgrounds and just different ways of looking at things. My favorite tale is the first conference of women in cybersecurity here in the United States was held in Nashville, Tennessee. And the National Science Foundation officer who said, yeah, we'll fund it. Maybe 100 people will show up. 300 of us showed up because we were so excited. I remember taking 7 of my women students to that conference. And of course, that conference has grown to well over 1,000 participants each year in the face-to-face and even virtual space. So it's definitely something that everyone is excited about. All right, so why get a PhD? First question people ask, is it really worth it? And I can tell you hands down, yes, it is. And just to address what Jessica said, I was actually over 50 when I started my PhD, so definitely have at it. So why get a PhD? There are a ton of opportunities, both in teaching, in research, and in industry. Here's the myth buster. It's no longer the 7 to 10 years of research, at least not in our field. In IT, it'll take you 3 to 4 years. And a lot of the graduate programs are designed for people who are even working full-time. So you can fit it into your life because they know you have to keep a roof over your head while you're improving your skill set and getting those 3 letters after your name. So what are the jobs you're going to look at? I'm not going to go through all of them, but being a computer defense consultant, if you like running your own business, that's something to definitely look at. Being a professor, if you like the freedom of teaching and education, that's another way to go. Being a computer security researcher and developer, and I always go small r, big D, because you're looking at how to solve problems that exist in the world. And because we're so interconnected, there are all these things popping up. As you know, the people creating all these gadgets that go online don't think about security. And so we, as the experts, have to figure out, how do you secure something like that? What the heck needs to happen? You can also be a director of information security, be a pen tester, cloud engineer. So there are just a ton of potential jobs out there that are unfilled and that somebody with a PhD can do. Research areas, applied cryptography, machine learning, artificial intelligence is so huge these days. Cyber law, working for Homeland Security in whatever country you happen to be in. All of these things are available. So now let's get into how do you pick a topic? So you have to think about your motivation. Why do you want the PhD? How is it going to help your career goals? What do you see? Have you been maybe not considered for a job because you didn't have a PhD? Are there things you want to do that require a PhD? Is there a particular problem you want to solve? Is there something you sit there and you go, you know, I really want to do the research to figure that out. So that's how you go about picking a topic. I'm going to slow down a little bit now and give some examples. So the first one, and it was wonderful. This was the first person that I was a co-supervisor for. And his name is Atli Gamundani, and he is at the Namibia University of Science and Technology, where I had done my Fulbright. So I had worked with him and their group there for many years. We've run cyber competitions there. They now run their national cyber competition at NUST. And so he had listened to a lot of my lectures. And so he came up with a lightweight authentication architecture for unsupervised Internet of Things in smart home applications. And you're like, okay, that's a long way of saying all these things in your smart homes, most of them have limited storage, no security. So you always see these things on TV where a hacker is able to get onto your wireless network and get onto it via the coffee pot, and then get onto your television set, and from there onto your laptop. So how do you set up security or authentication for your smart homes, especially perhaps for people with disabilities who really need to have all of those different gadgets in their home? How do you protect yourself? So he actually did his whole dissertation on that and finished it in about 3.5 years while he was working full-time at NUST and traveling and taking care of his family, etc. So that's how you come up with a topic, is just looking at the problems in the world that need to be solved. Another young man whose name I'm not going to mention because I don't have his permission, I got to sit in on his dissertation defense. So he did a lack of forensic resources in Nigerian Financial Crimes Agency. So he was actually able to go to Nigeria and interview the actual investigators at their national level and look at their resources and challenges. Things such as the fact that for forensics, so it's digital forensics, most of your commercial applications are made in the United States. And so trying to renew their licenses, things like that, actually hampered them. And then you get into the whole licensing issue, which I'm not going to touch on. You have to deal with their laws in Nigeria, and then actually basic digital forensics or even forensics practices and looking at their caseload. So it was a very, very fascinating and well-written dissertation about a real world problem. So that is another example of how you can fashion your dissertation. And in addition to needing more women in cybersecurity, you do need more people of color. And both of these men were men of color. And I'll mention on the side is Dr. Gamundani also works with another dear friend of mine, Dr. Fungai Bubashava, and with Dr. Mercy Shataro. So they are women of color in Namibia who also have their doctorates in this field. And again, it took them about 3 to 4 years because of the way doctoral programs are set up in IT. So these, again, differ very, very much from what you think of that it's going to take you 7 to 10 years to finish it. Okay, so how do you pick a school and an advisor? You go to conferences, and now that the world is opening up, and fingers crossed that it stays opened up, you go to cyber competition. So even this nice virtual competition, talk to people, see what's going on. I actually met my advisor by doing cyber competitions and being involved in some of the very early days of CCDC. You've got to talk to people. And if you hear something that attracts you, go read their publications, see what they're involved in. Where do they work? What do they do? Get to know them. Would they be supportive of you? Are your goals to get it done in 3 years? Get it done in 5 years? What's your timeline? What's going to work for you? And then also, of course, you need to have your own network of support, your own web of support to get you through the actual writing of the dissertation. Okay, so here we'll get to my actual journey. So I'm someone who came from a totally different background. So my bachelor's are in astronautical engineering and in archaeology. So yes, that means a Trekkie. I was to seek out new life and new civilizations. If you had told me then that I was going to end up in IT, I would have told you were nuts, but it happened. I ran small businesses, so I got an MBA in technology management to help people build databases for their companies, things of that nature. And then I started teaching, ended up as a Fulbright scholar. So how I ended up picking my topic, I was in Namibia at what was then the Polytechnic of Namibia, and I was teaching MTech classes. So these were evening classes for people who worked full time, trying to get their master's in technology. And I was lecturing on how companies could go in and see if you had been like doing industrial espionage and that you didn't need permission and that the corporation could just go in and image your computer and then charge you with a crime. And one of the students in the class raised his hand and he said, "Excuse me, madam, you can't do that in our country." And I was like, "Oh, but you all are a democracy." He's like, "Yes, but you're a democratic republic." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that is so very true." So my idea was, okay, how much do the laws differ? And how in the world do we figure out how to convict people when you've got crimes being committed by someone in one country against people in another country? So that's how I ended up picking my topic. And it was just something out of the blue that was like, oh, this is a problem that needs to be addressed. How I picked my school was, again, people I had talked to. I wanted to get my degree from a center of academic excellence. So I contacted people I knew at 2 of them and said, I want to get it done in 3 years. And they're like, yeah, we can make that happen for you. So I ended up picking, at that time, the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And my dissertation committee was formed, and that's how it got started. So what was my motivation? Why would I want a PhD? Because I wanted to be able to go to other countries and participate in IT, teach IT, specifically in Namibia and South Africa. And I knew I needed that PhD to be able to do it. And the things that happened as a result were just amazing. So I got to interview several experts in international digital law. one of the people actually wrote the ISO standard for digital forensics. And finding out that it was a woman who wrote those standards was like, okay, that makes sense. Because you look at some of the issues when I was researching, it would just say M. Grobler. And I'm like, why is there always an initial? And then once I got to interview her, it was like, because there was still that sort of thing of women don't belong in cybersecurity, especially creating the ISO standard for it. So there's still these little barriers that happen. And granted, that was almost a decade ago. It was still there at the time. So I got to build a whole database of the 50 United States, along with Namibia and South Africa, of civil law, criminal law, rules of evidence. And if you can't tell, I stuck with Dutch or British common law nations and did not touch on civil law nations. So put that together, figured out what questions would people ask? How do you actually look up something? If a person has not done the research, how are they going to know what information to even look for in the database? So it was just a lot of thinking that had to go into it. And I'll tell you up front, the research is the fun part. Having to sit down and actually write the dissertation can get tedious at points. I will tell you that up front. It's not, unless you really, really love writing, that can actually bog you down because you're like, oh, I want to go and look at this again. And at the end of the day, you've got to sit down and write the paper. That's going to get you out the door. And be willing for them to, your committee, to come back and say, please rewrite this, please redo this, etc. So help from unexpected sources. I was traveling to Namibia while I was in the middle. I had already finished my Fulbright, had left, started the dissertation, etc. Came back on another visit, and a friend of mine said, Amelia, how would you like to talk to a high court judge? And I'm like, well, certainly, since Namibia is on my list, how would a judge view this? So she's like, here's his name. And I'm like, okay, how do I address him? And she said, his Honorable Justice Mayenga. And so, okay, so I set it up and he's like, yes, you can come after lunch. Just come to the Supreme Court building. So I go in, I get scanned, walk in, sit down, wait for him to get back from lunch. And we start talking and I'm like, well, thank you. And I understand, you're a high court judge. And he's like, well, actually, no, I'm on the Supreme Court. And I'm like, similar to the US Supreme Court? He's like, yes, we are the final appeals court of the nation. And I was like, thank you for meeting with me, sir. Because I couldn't believe it. Here I am sitting here interviewing a Supreme Court justice of a different country. But it's just that it was so nice. And I got to spend an hour with him asking what type of data he would accept, what he needed to see if digital data was coming in from another country for a crime committed by someone in his country. And it was just fascinating. And I walked out of there, I was so just like, wow. I walked back to the campus, which was about a 30-minute walk. And the driver was like, why didn't you call me to come and get you? And I'm like, I needed to take a walk. So things like that can happen for you when you're doing this. So the other thing that needs to happen when you're doing your PhD is that work-life balance, because you're still got a full-time job, most likely, and you're working on the PhD and you've got your regular life. I joined a dance team while I was doing my dissertation. So that meant I had to go and dance at least 2 nights a week to still be on the team. So that's something that helped me keep my motivation up because I wasn't always sitting in front of the computer writing or researching. So the other item that comes up is being able to help others. Is with the PhD, I can go and be a role model to middle and high school women. So for example, this Saturday, I'll be giving a talk about my childhood to about 300 middle and high school young women of color in order to show them what they can actually do. And then I coach current doctoral candidates. So about a month and a half ago at 7 a.m. my time, which was 4 o'clock in the evening in Namibian time, I sat down with the doctoral candidates at NUST and answered their questions about how to survive doing the dissertation and how to be successful. Lately, we've been seeing now qualifications and standards being set up for cybersecurity on satellites, and think the space station. So I've created a website, which is not up and running just yet, Women of Color in Cyber and Outer Space, because you notice that my first degree is in astronautical engineering. And having ended up in cybersecurity, I want to show women of color that they can get into this. And I'm also a textbook author. So these are all the things that go into it. So I think now we're ready for Q&A, and I will stop the share.
So let's give them a minute because we've got a slight delay on the recording. But if you guys have questions, please do post them to the session 3 chat. We'd love to ask them of Amelia, but because we don't have any questions right now, I get to ask questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I heard your briefing, and I'm still on the fence, thinking through a PhD.
Okay.
I wondered, I guess maybe it's the imposter syndrome in me, but I'm not super technical, as you know. I'm technical enough, right? But not super technical. And I think my topic would probably be more along the lines of probably cyber as a sport or something to that degree. Is that even worthy of a PhD?
Yes, definitely. Because you're going to be doing research of how you're motivating these young people. So with all the work you've already done, how do these things intertwine? So for example, even my dissertation ended up being a qualitative dissertation. I was looking at law. It wasn't really a technical dissertation in the least.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So yeah.
And what about the affordability? If is this something that we should put money away and kind of plan for? The affordability of trying to get a PhD. I think I've heard some of them are around 25K, believe it or not. But then most of the ones that I'd want to get into are like $150,000.
I am not going to lie to you on that. I'm still paying for my PhD because I do work for a public institution. I've applied to get that forgiven because I've done the 10 years of payments. So there are pros and cons. So yes, it definitely, it's not cheap. You'd have to look for scholarships or funding from corporations.
And that is one of the questions in Discord from InPointy. That was an absolutely amazing talk. I really want my PhD, and in the same age range as you when you started. Is it really not too late? Are there scholarships available for us?
There are scholarships. You would have to, contact something like the Ford Foundation or similar types of groups. And you can start looking at some of the even Ivy League colleges because
Really?
they have endowment funds.
Oh,
So that's someplace else to look.
why does that matter?
Because they may provide, the school itself may pay for part of it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it just depends.
Excellent.
Especially, yeah.
I've also noticed there's a trend in cybersecurity that several of my peers
Mhm.
are taking the adjunct professor route. I know that wasn't part of your talk, but any thoughts on if they become an adjunct professor, are there any discounts or anything like that typically for education? Or it depends on the college?
Depends on the college, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, if so far as being able to take classes, typically they're going to allow you 1 or 2 free classes per term once you've worked for them like for 1 or 2 years.
Okay.
So, but it depends upon their policies. That's a good
Excellent.
question. Yeah,
Do you recommend considering if somebody has the time looking into being an adjunct professor, I guess would be my next question.
definitely, because you can contribute to the education of others, and you can see also what's going on at that particular school
Mhm.
and see if there are any professors that you would want to work with on your dissertation. That's another good way to get to know them.
Excellent. And then with your other hat, going into cyber games, because you know how much I like talking about cyber
Yes.
games. And Amelia is a wonderful advisor on the US cyber team. So thank you for your effort and time there. But you also volunteer at another program, right? Are there some plugs that you want to make in terms of cyber competitions out there?
Oh, wow. Okay. So next weekend is the Pacific Rim Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. There is the International Cyber Games coming up that I am so incredibly jazzed about to be representing the US as the US judge. So thank you for that opportunity, Jessica. Um, let's see what else is going on. Well, of course, Wicked Six is happening.
Yes.
I think those are, you have the National Cyber League. There are so many competitions out there. I encourage you to take advantage of them because they really, really teach you so much more than what you're going to get in the classroom.
I appreciate that. And I learned so much from you, Amelia. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. Are there any final words or thoughts on any topic for an audience of mostly women? Maybe some tips or takeaways or things you wish you knew, or favorite book or anything you want to say as we close out?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Um, you don't have to come from money to succeed. I remember when I got admitted, and I'll just say the word. So I got admitted to MIT. It's still really hard for me to just say, yes, I did. My dad took one look at it and said, I can't afford to send you there.
Oh, wow.
And I sat down and I filled out all the financial aid forms. And my first year, all my dad had to pay was $700.
Oh, wow. See,
Yeah.
now you're going to make me cry.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
do not let these obstacles get in your way. There is a way to get past them. And I'll have to do some research on how do we fund more women to get their PhDs.
I
That's
think
a
that'd
good
be
problem to
great.
solve.
Call out to Bobby Stempley. I know she'd love to help you with that too.
Okay, cool.
um, that'd be great. All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. I hope you do join us in Discord. We would love for you to post your social handles, your favorite book, and any podcast that you're listening to. And thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care.